sedition is unfortunately becoming extremely central to the conversation because, as we just pointed out, of its use. And Arima Sundaram is right to say that it's not only recently that it's being used or misused, there's a long trajectory. But is there a jump? And that's why we have with us Lubhyathi Rangarajan, who has been doing some research on sedition cases for Article 14. But before I come to your data, Lubhyathi, the government was asked a question in Parliament about sedition cases, and they put out some data based on the National Crime Records Bureau. And let's put that first up on the screen. The government data is telling you that from 2016 to 19, that's the period for which we have data on the number of people charge sheeted for sedition. That's a total of 300 people who've been charge sheeted, with a big spike in 2017, 160 people just in that year. But if you look at the database that you put together, that actually gives you a much bigger number. It's saying 10,000 have been charged with sedition in the past 10 years. 65% of those have been implicated after May 2014, when the Modi government came to power. There's been a nearly 30% jump in average annual cases under the Modi government. Over 400 people have been booked for criticizing politicians and governments on sedition charges, Lubhyathi, indicating that this is being used or misused as a tool to stifle, legitimate democratic criticism.
Right. Thanks for that introduction. Yes, this is what our data found, and we've also gone back to 2010, right? So some of the early cases in the decade, of course, revolved around the Kudankulam protests in Tamil Nadu. Again, hundreds of people, thousands of people actually charged with sedition under the UPA too.
Right.
So I think one of the things that we found, of course, through our research is that the meaning of sedition clearly changes depending on who is in power, right? So the application of the law obviously varies. But I think what has increased, as you pointed out, in the last 3 years, and the NCRB also points that out actually, is that the number of cases have risen in terms of the number of cases of sedition that have been filed in the last 3 years. So clearly what's being done is that the net is sort of being cast really wide to kind of, catch as many cases as you can.
Right.
And then these questions of nuanced, evidence-based approaches to charges of sedition are sort of not dealt with at this stage. And as you pointed out in your introduction, of these sorts of FIRs with these sort of vague allegations that have no link to incitement to violence is also a part of the research we found. So let me just point out 2 cases that we found, non-protest related, that took place under COVID times. So one person posted on Facebook saying there is a lack of ventilators in this particular state. Right? That person had an FIR filed against them. In another case, someone posted on Facebook about how there are inadequate food supplies.
Right.
And somebody else replied to that post saying, what is the name of the MLA of our constituency? And they had a case of sedition filed against them. So, I don't think the question really is, should we apply Kedarnath Singh only at the trial stage?
Right.
I mean, it's the law of the land that has to be applied across the board. I mean, I don't think there should be selective application of that judgment, because it's a very clear sort of judgment. Yeah.
Right. Okay, the Kedarnath judgment, just for those who don't know, is a kind of seminal judgment on sedition defined by the Supreme Court, which is cited most often.